This is Lifeworlds, the place where we explore life through other eyes and minds. Let's flip the script and discover how to orient your world around nature. I'm Alexa Permanish. Come join me as we get down and forage for fungi, stalk coyotes, draft laws for rivers, hum with beehives, sing bird language, and help beavers to dam again. Let these stories spark your reconnection to nature's multiverse. Learn how to bring ecosystems back to life, become an agent for other intelligences, and begin to see how you too are the sum of all life worlds. Hi friends. In today's dialogue, we'll be hearing from two very special Zen Buddhist monks about how Buddhism and spirituality can shift our perspectives, our practices of life-worlding, and how to be keenly awake and aware in this moment in time. These are practices that have changed my life and are probably the most impactful thing that have influenced me. And so I'm incredibly honored to be sharing this episode with you today. To begin, I would like to start us off with a story, one that took place in autumn last year. It's 6 a.m, and the monk is chanting, a guttural ancient cry, rhythmically punctuated by deep reverberations of the large brass bell, its vibrations undulating like snakes in water through the silent forest. The monk is sounding the bell. There's a light in the red pagoda where the bell is housed, and it shines brightly, the only illumination of the sleeping dawn, aside from the glowing pinpricks of the Milky Way, its presence hovering overhead. I watch, huddled in my scarves and pajamas on the temple steps. I am suffused with an undeniable sense of knowing that mankind has called this way to the cosmos since the beginning of time. I felt suspended in a place that could have been anywhere in deep human history, and somehow most certainly not in a small French village in the year 2023. The modern bustle felt far away. Here I was instead, a tender earth creature poised on the tip of the world, perched right up on the crust where earth becomes atmosphere, watching in reverie as ceremony fractaled across the ages. I wondered how many times bells have been rung at dawn and at twilight, wrapped in chanting, a prayer to the God of so many faces. Around me from the shadows emerged specters, dark ghosts, hooded and shuffling figures moving towards me on the temple steps. Some also stopped and turned and gazed at the monk. I wondered if they were experiencing something similar. There was no way to know for certain. Firstly, because we were all held in a pact of silence. And anyway, any question or word uttered right then would not have done any justice to the feeling. The prayer ceased. We all walked into the meditation hall, taking our seats on stacked arrangements of meditation cushions, each person making their own unique architectural Tetris totem, fiddling to find the right arrangement for stiff knees and long legs and bent backs. This scene took place at Plum Village, a Zen Buddhist monastery and retreat center nestled in the forested hills of a small French village outside of Bordeaux. The Vietnamese peace activist, monk, poet, and teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, who is affectionately called Thai by his community, established the community in 1982, originally as a small rustic farmhead, and today it's grown into Europe's largest Buddhist monastery, with over 200 resident monks and nuns living and practicing across 4 different hamlets. It's also worth describing who Thich Nhat Hanh was for those who haven't come across this incredible human before. Ordained as a monk, age 16 in Vietnam, when the war came to Vietnam, the country's monks and nuns were confronted with the question of whether to adhere to the contemplative life and stay meditating in the monasteries, or to help those around them suffering under the bombings of turmoil and of war. Thich Nhat Hanh was one of those who chose to do both, and in doing so, founded the Engaged Buddhism movement, coining the term in his book, Vietnam, Lotus in a Sea of Fire. His belief was that meditation is not to escape from society, but to come back to ourselves and see what is going on. He says, once there is seeing, there must be acting. With mindfulness, we know what to do and what not to do to help. He often spoke eloquently about the interconnectedness of all life, emphasizing the deep relationship between humans and nature. He coined the term interbeing, which you will hear me and have probably heard me using a lot on the podcast, which speaks to the relationships between all things. Due to his activism and founding of multiple civil society groups dedicated to peace, Martin Luther King nominated Thich Nhat Hanh for the Nobel Peace Prize. He launched an international Wake Up Schools program, training teachers to teach mindfulness in schools in Europe, America, and Asia. And there's so much more. I could go on. Thich Nhat Hanh has left an incredible legacy on this earth. And it was in 2022 that he passed away, surrounded by his loving community. It will come as no surprise then that over the years, Plum Village has become known as one of the most actively engaged Buddhist communities on the climate and ecological crises. Throughout the year, they host retreats for up to 1,000 people at a time, many of them activists, sustainability professionals, artists, teachers, executives, people like myself, non-categorical maybe, drawn to the monastery, both with the curiosity and soul necessity of experiencing the rhythms of monastic life and living in Sangha, spiritual community. During the days here, you begin to experience what is called mindfulness in daily activities: stillness, contemplation, awareness of every breath, slow steps kissing the earth, calming the mind, meals giving thanks to all the beings, circles of deep listening, and of course, teachings of the Dharma and Buddhist philosophy. I was invited to attend a special retreat hosted by an organization called Global Optimism, which is spearheaded by the tireless Costa Rican diplomat Cristiana Figueres, famously known as the architect of the Paris Agreement for Climate. She has openly shared that Plum Village saved her life following personal moments of intense difficulty, and has made it a mission of hers to bring others who are part of the movement to experience the healing and perspective that the Zen Buddhist practices engender. I've said so much, and I have so much more to say. Before handing over to our guests, I just want to share a quick personal angle on this, that Buddhist practice is probably the greatest anchor in my life, and the single thing that keeps me strong, in awe, grounded, and fundamentally has transformed how I see and feel the world. I've spoken a lot on the show about fragmented consciousness, a mind that sees parts and not the whole. Meditation and other practices for me is how we begin to heal that mind. And many of the things I speak to on Lifeworld and do in my work, including non-duality, sacred care, can only go so far as an intellectual exercise. These are views that must be deeply and non-cognitively felt. And so for that, I have profound gratitude for all these teachings and for those who have carried them forth throughout the ages. As they say, I'm laughing a little bit because there's a rooster in the background. As they say, the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. And I am sensitive to try to condense inexpressible teachings into a podcast form. If you would like to know more, I have linked to the lineage that I have been practicing in, which is Mahamudra Buddhism, sometimes also Dzogchen. And I was fortunate enough to experience one of the West's great teachers, Daniel Brown, before he passed away last year. Now, for today's conversation, we are in the wonderful presence of Sister True Dedication and Brother Spirit. Before entering Plum Village, Sister True Dedication studied history and political thought at Cambridge University and worked as a journalist for BBC News in London. In the early years of her monastic training, she assisted Thich Nhat Hanh in their engaged Buddhist actions for human rights, religious freedom, applied ethics, and ecology. Brother Spirit began his training in Plum Village in 2008, and before that was studying mathematics at Cambridge and worked professionally as a composer. And since he has composed many of the community's beloved chants. They also both helped to found the international Wake Up movement that I mentioned a little bit earlier, a community of young meditators focused on finding new ways to combine mindfulness and engage Buddhism. So here we will talk about fragmentation of consciousness, how to hold the truth of non-duality within difficult contexts, dehumanization, deanimation, and what Buddhism can teach us about our relationship to other life. A deep dive, or a semi-deep dive, one could say, because one could spend a lifetime studying it, into the Mahayana Diamond Sutra, which is the world's earliest printed text, and its invitation for us to reconsider 4 key notions of existence. We talk about finding and making peace with one's activism, the seeds of wisdom of a 4,000-year-old magnolia tree, how to hold the suffering of the world, and how to look out for and be conscious of spiritual bypassing, instrumentalizing, and all of these tricky get-out-of-jail-free cards. So, all that and more today on Life Worlds. Thank you. Brother, sister, welcome so much to the show. And thank you so much for being here. I'm really, really, really excited and happy to be speaking with you today.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you, Alexa. It's lovely to be with you.
The last time we were all together, we were in a retreat that was being hosted by Cristiana Figueres for climate leaders. And that was my second time to the village, and to the monastery. But I've been following your tradition for a very long time. And as I'll have spoken in my introduction, Buddhism has probably been the core practice and guidepost for how I understand the world. And so I'm really, really in awe and excited to be speaking about this today. I would love to sort of kick us off with the life worldsy angle and to talk about this concept of non-duality that can be it can sound semi-comprehensible and intellectualized, but I think the embodied sense of what this is might be more evasive. And as your teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh once said, he says, we are here to awaken from our illusion of separateness. And something I've often asked myself throughout my life, but especially recently, is why is it that we actually come to feel separate in the first place? Like, why is this interconnection something that we have to return to? Is there like an obligatory phase of growth that humans have to pass through where our consciousness must fragment and then we must return? Or why is it that this isn't just how people are, full stop?
I don't think it's necessarily the case that we humans have always been so sort of caught in this illusion of fragmentation or separation. I definitely think it's the case now. So we could ask, what is it about our way of living or our way of thinking now that gives rise to fragmentation or this feeling of separation or isolation, even alienation? But I do think at different times in history it might have been different, and for different cultures in different places it's different. And it's even different for us now according to where we are and what we're doing. I think it's much easier to feel fragmented and alone when we're spending a lot of our life looking at screens. But as soon as you go out into the forest and spend long enough and stay still enough, then that sense of loneliness or isolation or fragmentation can actually fall away quite quickly. So it's not that the reintegration or the reconnection might be closer than we think, but I do feel that there's something about the way our civilization is organized now, the way our education works, the way that language sort of has its hooks deep into us, that makes us feel this separation very keenly, and that strengthens it. So my interest is in how to undo that. What's the training, what's the path of practice or training that helps us to reconnect? And partly from, so I mean, this could be we could talk the whole time about just this question because it's so huge. But I think one aspect of it is just to notice the ways in which language has conditioned us to think in terms of separation. So the fact that we have a name and that we name other things, that most of our language is nouns, it's sort of all of this seems to imply a separation, that there are real separate things like me and you and Sister True Dedication, and we're not the same, we're different. We seem to have boundaries, and there's lots of ways that those boundaries get reinforced by, for example, the fact that we have to compete. All our whole education reinforces the idea that ultimately we're alone, unless you're very lucky. But mostly, I mean, if you take an exam implicitly, you're alone. You don't take an exam as a team. You don't take an exam as a community. You take an exam as an individual, and so you get this very strong idea: I'm alone. It's just me against the world, and sometimes capitalism also helps to reinforce that idea. So I think the more we can sort of have different perspectives on the ways the idea of separation is reinforced, then we can start to understand how we can unpick it. Because I think, in a sense, that's mindfulness, right? It's just, awareness of the suffering, or awareness of the true situation, gives rise to the possibility of freedom. But first of all, we really have to understand the suffering. So, I mean, that's a great question that you asked.
Sister, you might want to chime in. I just want to highlight that those points you make on language, education, you're not often aware of the water you swim in. Something that also strikes me is a misunderstanding, possibly, of the Buddhist concept of non-duality or interconnectedness, which is, if you're perfectly enlightened, you have no more sense of self. Now, I'm a baby in diapers when it comes to my practice, but what I kind of comprehend, it's understanding that there will be a sense of self, but contextualizing it within connection. Is that correct? So it's not like if you're perfectly enlightened, which is maybe an oxymoron, you suddenly, there is no self. It's just you perceive that there is a wider whole. Or how would you sort of understand that? Because that's also, I think, something that people struggle with, because they're trying to get somewhere. Maybe there isn't that thing that they even need to get to.
I think this idea of a separate self can, because when we're talking about separateness, and like Brother Spirit was just saying, we have identifiers, we identify with our body, our name, our feelings, our story, and it can make us like not as porous as we kind of truly are. And I think the spiritual path in our kind of Zen Buddhism is to really, in a daily, intimate way, really become familiar with all the ways in which we're completely porous. We're made of what we're eating, what we're watching, what we're consuming, what we're feeling, that we're made of the atmosphere around us, the people we're spending time with, what we've been reading, the education we've had, the ancestral pain that's been transmitted to us, or the ancestral values that have been transmitted to us. So for us, when we speak about no self, there's this other great term in Buddhism that many of your listeners will be aware of, is emptiness. Empty, being empty of a separate self. Another way we could see it is being full of the whole cosmos. So we're full of everything, and then we're empty of only one thing, a kind of separate self. So allowing ourselves to experience this body and our sensations, whether it's the sunrise we're seeing, can we really feel that that sun is coming into our eyes? Can we really feel that the food is entering our body? Can we really feel the breeze on our skin, the rain on our forehead, whatever it is? It's like to really allow ourselves to feel full of everything happening around us in sort of the physical, tangible sense, but also in terms of consciousness. And that is what helps us to understand how things have come to be. Because I think often the more kind of materialistic, narrow paradigm that we kind of grow up in, it's like this plus that equals that. And it's very narrow and very linear, but we're not really seeing all the different kind of causes and conditions in play. And so this kind of opens up a much deeper sense of why things have come to be. If we live in a divided world, a polarized world, how has that come to be? How are we feeding that? How are we participating in that? If we've come to be in a violent world, how have we contributed that? So it gives us an interesting perspectives on understanding like our current situation and our relationship to the planet in particular.
That's so beautifully said. Actually, on that part of all causes and conditions, how they come to be, something I've really, really struggled with. As you say, no, it's easy to stand in the forest and feel that interconnection, brother spirit, right? And if all things are interconnected and one, and actually I laughed, you said this thing in an interview I was listening to, brother spirit, something about, Buddhism isn't about turning the whole cosmos into a smoothie. Which I thought was really funny. But does this mean I am also one with the genocide and with the bombs and with the murderers and with the pedophiles and all of that, which I find deeply painful to witness and so antithetical to my values, because it's easy for me to feel the oneness in a positive context. But does non-duality, I mean, it cannot not. How do we hold that truth that if we are all one, we are also one with all those other things? The things that we may deem ugly or repulsive. And something that brings to mind is your teacher's poem on Call Me By My True Name. I think that's the name of the poem, more or less, but I'll put it in the show notes. But I would love to hear you speak with that, because that is something that I find very difficult to actually hold.
This is a tough one. Everybody loves into being when it's butterflies and rainbows, right? We interact with the clouds and the moon, and it's all, it's all sweet and lovely. But it's like you say, it's much harder to accept that, once we've acknowledged that porosity that Sister True Dedication was speaking about, that makes us, we have to then also become responsible, co-responsible for everything, which can be hard. But in another sense, as soon as we see our interconnection with those who are, manufacturing weapons, who are firing missiles, who are dropping bombs, who are, polluting the oceans and the rivers and cutting down the forests, as soon as we acknowledge our co-being with all of those aspects of reality that we obviously don't condone, that cause us great pain. In fact, in that very moment, that's what gives us agency again, because when we are connected to the darkness, we can start to transform it. That means that my present moment now, how I respond to that pain, is already transforming that pain, because I'm not separate from it. I have some, it gives me back my power to act in the world. And I think a lot of spiritual practice is about that. It's about identifying our true zone of agency, as it were. Because if we're not connected to those dark and difficult and terrible things, the injustices that are ongoing, then what can we do? All we can do is kind of shout at our screens and feel the horror and the, we feel kind of impotent rage because we can't change it. But when we are connected to it, then everything that we do and the way that we do it becomes meaningful, including the way that we handle our feelings about the injustices that are ongoing and the suffering that is ongoing. Because my response to it now becomes relevant. It becomes part of the situation and the direction that suffering can take. Like in this present moment, what can I do? The front line of action is right in my heart, as it were. So if I give in to the rage, then maybe I'm not making the situation better. I'm contributing, or I'm continuing to, I'm allowing that to spill over and to ripple into my life, into the people around me, into how I comment on things online and so on, how I speak, how I think. Whereas if I can recognize, okay, I take responsibility for the piece of the pain that I can feel, right? That I have the space and the capacity in my life, in my circumstances, in my growth, that I have the capacity to deal with now. I take it on and I'm going to metabolize it. I'm going to do the kind of spiritual alchemy in my heart. And I know how to do that. I'm confident that I can face that pain without needing to cover it up, without needing to distract myself, without needing to react. I can care for that piece of it, which is not the whole of it, but I do my part.
That's so. I love that line that you said. The front line of action can be in my heart. That's really, really gorgeous. And I've sometimes had the feeling when I encounter a human action or a human being that's embodying something that I find deeply challenging, I sometimes find myself thinking like that could have been me, you know, in different circumstances and different birth, and then the next step is sort of, well, that actually is me. and you know, am I willing to face that this is a part of the human of which I am? Sister, I'm wondering if there's anything you'd like to add to the beautiful reflections of Brother Spirit.
Perhaps just that this idea that we're so closely connected also helps us to not dehumanize others. And I think that it could even be that it's something that's happening more and more in our kind of consciousness and way of seeing things, but we can kind of have a tendency to vilify or dehumanize the other side. And we know that, I mean, in the study of war, like, we're able to kill because we see the other side, the enemy, as less than human somehow, not worthy of life and safety and respect and so on. And I think that when we look at the sort of psychology and how our way of seeing things can really uproot the kind of origins of war in the human psyche, the origins of genocide and violence, it's when we kind of dehumanize the other side. And to be able to say, yeah, we also have those seeds of fear, discrimination, existential, fear for our survival, discrimination, like really so sure that our path is a better path, our religion is a better religion, our culture or our worldview is somehow, superior. Like those seeds, like all of us have them, like Brother Spirit was saying, we just have a little part of it in us, but we have some kind of aspect of that, even if it's just a little drop of that feeling of having chosen maybe a better path, or some kind of maybe resentment of others for living in a way that is not in alignment with our values and things like that. And on a sort of bigger scale, that is what's ultimately leading to these kind of wars. So by being able to keep the perpetrators human, it allows us to keep our compassion alive. It allows that really like heart-stretching vastness to say, okay, it has come to be that this people or this country, this nation, or this faction has decided that this kind of violence or oppression or extraction, if we even talk about violence against the earth, is acceptable and okay. But we will not participate in dehumanizing those perpetrators. We will see that they are also humans, and that is, as Brother Spirit was saying, this is the other part of hope, which is because they are fully human, they also have the seeds of awakening and compassion in them. They have the chance to turn it around. And by keeping that possibility open, like the possibility to change the direction of our civilization, to find reconciliation in fields of war, like these become possible because humans are still involved. And so part of the practice, at least for us as sort of nonviolent activists from a spiritual perspective, is to really in our heart and mind preserve that humanity, even of the perpetrators, even while they are causing harm. Like that is one of our challenges in kind of Mahayana Buddhism, our particular flavor of Buddhism. We really make a vow to not hate and to not vilify, not wish wish ill even of those currently doing harm. I mean, it's a tall order, but that's kind of where our practice takes us.
I literally had shivers as you were speaking. This feels like this part of the conversation and the view feels like one of the most important practices and insights for today. Absolutely, because those of us, and I know you are too, and we'll speak later in the episode about the work of Plum Village in the climate space and in the sort of engaged activism space, because it's something that absolutely is, I think, very deeply unique about the seed of wisdom that you're holding today. But how we, as you said, how we do not dehumanize, even as we try and change the systems and work with people. Like, it's a profound act of love and compassion. And gosh, if we can support activists, change makers to hold that alongside the anger and all the other things we can also talk about, it feels incredibly potent and possibly one of the only ways that we can really transform these systems. So thank you for your insights on that. And sort of from the dehumanizing piece, I want to speak about de-animating, because Lifeworlds speaks a lot about the life worlds, the embodied experiences, the perspectives of other life, which is a little bit what we're speaking about now with humans, but let's shift into the squirrels or the cats or the nematodes or whatever else. We haven't just dehumanized in order to create genocide, but we've deanimated to create ecocide in a way. And we won't get into the roots of that, although they're probably very similar to what we discussed earlier in the call and the evolution of the Western mind and Western psyche. What does Buddhism have to say about our relationship to other life, other intelligences, sentience? A lot of the science that's coming out now, and we have this also on the podcast, is deeply fascinating, right? And intuitively one can sense maybe that, intelligence and sentience is everywhere. But what is the stance that you take on that, the particular way that Buddhism engages that conversation?
Yeah, so I can start, and this is an area of Buddhism that I think for both of us, for both Sister True Dedication and I, is it's very close to our hearts, and it's a big part of the transmission of wisdom that we received from our teacher as well. And he always used to speak about a particular sutra called the Diamond Sutra, which is a Mahayana sutra. We don't know exactly when it was written, but it's probably the earliest printed text that we're aware of. There's a manuscript that was found in the Zen Hanh caves. My Sister True Dedication can correct me on the details if I get it wrong. But it's printed with these wood blocks that have been carved, and then it's sort of printed so they could make multiple copies. And we went to see there's a copy of it which is in the British Museum in London, and then we actually went to see it with Tai one day. But so Tai, our teacher, used to speak about this text as being the oldest text on deep ecology. So there's a lot in there, but I think maybe right on the sort of the question that you brought us to. In this text, we are invited to remove 4 notions. So it's right in the heart of this realization that our way of thinking, which can be largely unconscious, has an impact on our way of perceiving, on our way of acting, on our way of feeling even. And it's all around this question of separateness. And so the first notion that we're invited to remove, we've already kind of looked at a little bit in our conversation so far, which is the idea of separateness, the idea of separate self. So we've already kind of done that. Okay, we've discovered the porosity, of our being, our interbeing with other humans. With we can touch our interbeing in both time and space. So in space, we see that we are interdependent with with other people who influence us, with our culture, with our education. In time, we with our ancestors, with our descendants, teachers and students, genetic lineages, spiritual lineages, cultural lineages. So this all helps us to remove this idea of separateness. But then the sutra takes us further, and this is the question that you brought us to now. So the next notion that we're invited to remove is the notion of a human being, which can feel quite surprising because it's like, well, I thought human is fairly a self-evident notion, right? There are human beings, here we are, we're human, you're human, I'm human. But the sutra says, no, take away that notion. And that allows us to discover our interbeing with the more than human world, right? As soon as so the idea is, let's not trap ourselves in the box called human, because we're not just that, right? That allows us to look out at what's around us, at the forest, at the sky, at the mycelial networks, and go, that is also me. And we know it's kind of obvious in a sense that it is also us, with everything that we know about our dependence on the natural world, for the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the food that we eat. We can't exist separately from it. So it is us. But then the sutra goes even further. So, okay, so next, let's remove the notion of living being even. And this gets us to the question of animate, right? Animate or inanimate. Because we have a kind of, we make these hard lines around that which is animate and that which is inanimate. And I think, as you were alluding to in your question, we have, by our way of construing the nature of reality, in the sort of Western scientific sense, we've given rise to the notion of a dead cosmos, which is just made of dead bits of matter, of stuff, which is just interacting deterministically and meaninglessly, ultimately. And so we think that the earth is dead, and that the idea that the earth is dead allows us to extract, without feeling that there's any particular moral weight to that action, of mining, strip mining, destroying, fracking, blasting, we sort of think, well, it's inert matter, right? It's inanimate, so it doesn't feel anything. So why, more than 1,500 years ago, do these Buddhist masters invite us to remove this idea of living being? Because that takes away the boundary, and we see our interbeing with that which we consider to be inert, and we allow in to the idea of animate, or into the present moment, everything. In fact, we don't make a distinction. We don't draw a line between us and the rocks, us and the planet, us and the water. So that allows all of these things to become, part of us as well.
I just had an image, by the way, when you said we moved from the box called human, and I really did, not to make the sutra kind of trite, but imagine if you brought people to the village, and when they arrived, you're like, okay, you're literally put in these boxes, and people take off a box one by one, or like the physical movement, and like, now I'm leaving the box of human, and I'm moving into the box of living being, and now because I've done a lot of sort of like ritual theater or theater in terms of therapy. And when you physically move out of these spaces, it can be quite powerful. So as you was imagining that, I was just like taking myself out of all these boxes. And so now, sister, I'm ready to be really unboxed. Please continue.
Well, what's so wonderful about these notions is it allows us to kind of touch both a deep humility and also an incredible empowerment is the sort of result of this. It's not to sort of excuse us of anything or say, oh, we're all just part of the whole, so like to lose our agency, but actually we feel the humility, I think, is so important for our species right now. I think some of the overconfidence and the arrogance is what's at the root of some of the harm. And at the same time to feel this agency, a bit like we were saying, that when we feel closer to suffering, then there's something we can do to act, even when we feel that suffering in our heart. The same is true with our relationship with the vast, magical world, mysterious world. And there's a beautiful line that our teacher once said when he was describing this thing about animacy and inanimacy. And he was saying that everything kind of in the cosmos has its own way of knowing. So he would say, this bamboo here, it has its own intelligence. It has its way of knowing. Even an electron has its way of knowing. And to expand our the space we have for ways of knowing and respecting these mysterious ways of knowing of the living world around us is such a key to unlocking our own consciousness, our own openness of mind, but also kind of paths forward for how we can truly live like in harmony with this living world around us. And the fourth notion that Brother Spirit was talking about is that the Diamond Sutra challenges us also to let go of the idea of lifespan. And this becomes very powerful. This is basically to say that there is something in our sort of spiritual traditions have given us that, our life only begins, either at the moment of birth or conception, and it definitely ends at the moment of death. But when we understand energy and, if you like, the kind of ripples of resonance of our life actions, our physical actions, our speaking, our actions of sort of thought, and how we're kind of really contributing energy in the world, they continue us kind of in all directions, and also long after our sort of physical body might disintegrate. And so there's this idea that, yes, of course, we're not saying people don't die. There is birth, there is death, but there's something much deeper beyond that. And that when we can transcend that, it gives us whole new perspectives on how we might live in better harmony with our planet. So, for example, our life now is the fruit of like many generations. So we can go further back than 7, right? We could go back 700 generations if we want, or 70. So how things have come to be, we have a responsibility, but our responsibility is also a ripening, a kind of fruition of a lot of generations before. And this can be really important because some people fall into the trap of such nihilism towards humanity. Like we kind of hate ourselves for being human. We feel completely responsible in this lifetime, and that guilt can be really crippling. But when we see we're part of a river of life, but also those wise ones before all of this crazy paradigm that we're living in now, like we also have those generations. Maybe we don't have to go back that far, maybe, I don't know, 100, 200, 300 generations. We did have ancestors that knew how to live in harmony, knew how to respect the natural world, knew how to listen and learn and allow nature to be a teacher. So in that sense of the past, and also in terms of the future, because sometimes, and I particularly see it in our generation now, people in the prime of their life really wanting to act and save and protect and shift things, we can put ourselves under huge pressure because we think it must happen in our lifetime. And that can be such a cause of burnout and immense kind of self-punishment, because we deny ourselves the right to enjoy a silent walk, to enjoy the sunset or sunrise, to enjoy a peaceful hour just lying in a forest. We don't let ourselves do those things because it doesn't feel useful, because we've even allowed those ideas of like instrumentalizing humanity, like everything must be productive and impactful and must bring great benefit. We've allowed that to kind of colonize even our right to enjoy nature in silence, doing nothing. So this idea of like a lifespan beyond us is also super helpful for activists, because it allows us to see we do our part and then we can have peace. And whether we can contribute a few hours a week or a few days a week to our activism or our world-shifting work, that is our part, and we have done it, and then we can have peace. And we don't put ourselves under this huge pressure, kind of like, it's got to happen in my lifetime. This is it. This is all we've got. And actually with Christiana Figueres, we get into interesting conversations, because then she'll suddenly be like, but there's still the ticking clock. You know that, right? 2030, you know that, right? So yes, all of it is true, but like to be able to not lose this precious human experience we have for however many years we have it, we have to live deeply, have to enjoy these skies, sunrise, moonrise. We have to enjoy the bird song, the forest. It is a very precious gift, and we have that opportunity. And so how to be able to make peace with our activism is what this teaching on a kind of touching a lifespan beyond this life can kind of help us with.
I'm going to jump ahead to then bring us back, because in that last, the Christiana pointing her finger, you started touching on the sort of immanent transcendent piece. But just even going further, because what I'm noticing in our conversation is like the engaged nature of especially who you two are, and I mean your amazing backgrounds and your historicities permeates our entire conversation. And so, what I was going to touch on later in the conversation around this sort of offer of Plum Village today and of your lineage to the world in a time of climate intensity, let's say crisis, collapse, challenge, opportunity. I'm brought right back to a talk that you gave, sister. And as I was preparing for this conversation, I was looking back over my diary. And so I'm going to bring us ahead a little bit forwards, because you shared this framework that is now, I'm realizing it was linked to the Diamond Sutra. Maybe I didn't realize it at the time. It was so liberating and eye-opening for me. And so you said, shared, I think it was these three things. There's a lot of sub-things within them, but you said, know who you are, know what action is, and then the insight of impermanence can set us free. And what I had written down was when you said, know who you are, it was kind of in apostrophes. There are these things, right? You are a representative of the earth, taking care of the earth, ripening across multiple lifetimes in a generative life force. That sounds like the beginning of the sutra almost. And then knowing what action is sounds like what you just spoke to, which is these causes and conditions that we don't really know when they ripen. And then, brother, was it you that spoke once about magnolia seed that kind of sprouted? But that might be something beautiful to share. But what I'm hearing is removing the pressure of the I means that we can sink back into these timelines, into these generations, into these ancestries. And that helps us act with a certain lightness, especially those of us that are oriented towards trying to make the world better while we're here. But wondering if there was anything else you wanted to share, because this is such a profound translation of the lineages by your, I don't know if it was by you or by your teacher, by your collective for today. And I think it's worth just residing in it for a little bit longer and seeing if you wanted to share anything else on it. Or the magnolia, maybe you could even share that magnolia seed, because it's such a powerful image.
So this is just it's sort of happenstance. Many years ago, I saw this documentary, which I think it was a BBC documentary, and it was about, I think it was mostly about plant life. And there was just a little segment of it that was speaking about an archaeological dig in Japan, where they were looking at a human settlement that it was dated to be about 4,000 years old. And in one of the excavations, they were excavating, a midden, a place they would have put their organic refuse, and there was rice, and there were different things in this spot that they were excavating, and they found a single magnolia seed. And so this magnolia seed had been sitting there in the ground for 4,000 years. 4,000 years. And they thought, well, let's see, maybe we can get it to germinate. And so they did whatever they did. I don't know, gave it a little bit of water and a bit of light, a little bit of soil, or whatever was needed. And this 4,000-year-old seed sprouted. And a magnolia tree of previously sort of thought to be extinct variety of magnolia sort of bloomed and grew. And then, they were able to propagate this species. And to me, it just speaks to our ignorance about the nature of life. So for anybody who really delves into the question, what is life? I think the only conclusion is that we don't have any comprehensive definition. People have tried different approaches, in sort of the scientific world, in the life sciences. They sort of say, well, is it metabolism? Is it, there has to be some exchange of energy. But we know that over those sort of spans of time, it's not possible for metabolism to be occurring. There's a kind of stasis. So that it's this seed would be characterized under our usual definitions of life. It would be characterized as dead, but it's obviously not dead. It's just waiting for the right conditions. So I take that also to on a sort of metaphorical level to see, well, and because sometimes, when things are hard and when we get overwhelmed, and I speak for myself, sometimes the suffering is so much, the suffering of the world, the challenge, the difficulty of our present moment, of our situation. And I sometimes ask myself, well, who am I to be able to do anything to help? How can I possibly make any difference? But if I give rise to this, this if I remember this story about the magnolia seed, then I can invite this question mark, over what it is that I think I am, and I can allow for the possibility that there are seeds of wisdom, in my lineage, in my lineages, right? Because we all stand in multiple lineages, that may be just waiting for the right conditions to germinate, and they may be very patient. They may be able to wait a long time, and then when the right conditions of community and and love and care and presence show up, they will sprout. They will be there for us. So the wisdom and the kind of power that we need to act, we can't say that it's not there. We can't limit ourselves to the idea of our own kind of frailty or limitedness. We don't know that much. So it's also a kind of sense of humility. Like, I have to be humble enough to recognize that there may be great wisdom just waiting there, waiting to germinate.
Thank you, brother. It's such a beautiful image. And I think for all of us, like this, as Joanna Macy often says, it's a wonderful time to be alive. And there is so much wisdom ripening in this moment. And there are other wisdoms that will take more time and be like that incredible magnolia seed and endure and endure and endure and then emerge, maybe right when they're kind of most needed. And it reminds me also of something that Rebecca Solnit, who also has been on retreat with us, and we've grown a lot from our friendship. And she's speaks a lot about indirect consequences. And I think for those of us who are kind of more activists by nature, it's such a helpful concentration. Actually, we could like a way of looking, training ourselves also to not say that because our intended goal or wish might not have succeeded, there may be huge indirect consequences that may end up having a much greater longer term impact. For example, the way we work together, how we might collaborate as communities, as diverse communities. We have the chance to live in a diverse international community, very intentionally living at close quarters in dormitories. And that's just such an incredible human experience, and gives rise to all sorts of impacts in the world that we kind of might not imagine. And so for many of us, the way we work with our teams, with our friends, and the kind of partnerships we build, there may be all sorts of outcomes of that weaving together of knowledge and insight and reconciliation and healing that we're doing in this generation that may have huge kind of consequences for the future. And Rebecca Solnit, she also, this is other thing I really love. She says, all of us, she's like, all of us who are activists, like, we know why we do what we do. We've all come to some kind of point of choice, and we're like, this is how I'm going to spend my time and energy, or this is what's most important to me. But do we know what we do does? Like, we know why we do what we do, but do we really know what we do does? Like, can we see all of those consequences and impacts of our work, our way of being, our way of showing up, the kind of little boundaries that we're all pushing in our own fields? And I think it's such a kind of helpful perspective, as we kind of breaking out of all those boxes, Alexa, like we smash them all open, and also allow ourselves to see things with fresh eyes and to give value to even the smallest actions. And this is one place where we apply the principle of interbeing too in our tradition. We know that we say that the right action in one place is kind of right action everywhere. Like that action contains within it all space, all time. It's kind of non-local. Mm-hmm. So, and then our teacher used to say, you know, wherever you are, just be a Buddha in that place. Wherever you are, that could be just around your family kitchen table. It could be, you know, working in a shop, just wherever you are, like wherever you are, working in the fields, working in a lab, wherever you are, just be a Buddha in that one place. And that is already complete. That is already enough.
You know, what you're both sharing makes me kind of feel like the universe has my back, or like there's like everything is conspired. You know how often in Plum Village you guys say, you know, in this plate of food, I see the whole universe. Well, I'll use different language, but conspiring for my existence, let's say, or, you know. And sister, actually, I think I sent this in our Plum Village group, but I recorded an eating meditation very much inspired by what you shared about eating the broccoli in the room. And so, you know, our listeners, I'll link that in the show notes, but it's a Plum Village sort of meditation on cosmos and our food. But in that sense that, you know, everything is sort of conspiring and coming together. Something you said earlier about this sort of, you know, these ways of knowing, right? When you're speaking about the sutra and, you know, can I remember that I am not just me? Can I remember that I am all these ancestors and we're all here together and they're on my back and I'm... How can people in their daily life remember that, right? Like they might listen to this, we might come 5-6 days to the village, but is it like, you know, as simple as, you know, put a sticky on your fridge, or how do you really encourage people to constantly come back to that insight?
It's good to have a kind of, to make it practical, to make it real. And that's what we call the practice, right? That's the practice is activating these insights, because in a sense, the insight is relatively easy to touch, right? Of interconnectedness. We can sort of get it intellectually, but then when we look at the quality of our daily life and our actions, we might have a chance to realize, I get it intellectually, but I'm not yet living it, right? Because it's good to be kind of to have some honesty about, you know, okay, so how did I do, right? How did I do in my way of eating the piece of broccoli? How did I do in my way of dealing with a difficult email or with a difficult colleague or a difficult situation? Did I really show up to that interaction with the insight of into being alive, or did I go back into my pain and my reactivity? You know, and so we can really kind of be objective and kind of look at the evidence. Okay, what's the evidence of my daily life? And that gives us a chance to be a little bit humble and to go like, okay, although yes, I get it intellectually, I haven't yet, you know, been able to actualize this insight fully. So what is my path to do that? And there are lots and lots of ways. So basically, in you know, when you look at any Plum Village practice or any meditation practice, it can be understood to be a way to bring this insight to life in one of its different aspects. But I'm going to focus in on one, because you asked the question about, you know, how can I remember maybe that my ancestors are there with me. So I just use a recent example from my life, because this is a life for me too still, you know, it's all work in progress. So I'm in the process of writing a book, and there was a chapter that I was writing, which is sort of quite personal. It's relating to a part of a moment in my life that was very painful and difficult, which is the death of my mother when I was 18. And I got really stuck. Like I just couldn't do it. I just felt like it's too much. I don't know how to say this, you know, with enough I just got stuck. I was looking at the blank page, and I just couldn't make progress. So thanks to my teacher and my tradition, I have learned practices and ways, practical ways, to activate this insight of the ancestors are there with me. So what I did on that day was, okay, stop what I'm doing. This is not working. I'm not going to solve it with just this. So, down tools, as it were, and go for a walk. So I went for a walk. I sat by a river. I was in a very beautiful place, and I sat for a long time by the river. But I wasn't in a great space. It was very painful and difficult. I was kind of feeling the time pressure and the challenge, and I have to do this thing, and I don't know how to do it, and I don't know how to do it deeply enough and well enough, and maybe I can't do it. And it's like, even after years of practice, it's still possible to go into doom spirals. This is entirely possible, but then we know how to deal with it. So I'm kind of like, okay, I acknowledge all these feelings. I bring my awareness back to my body. I relax my body. I'm here. The river is here. And I'm going to entrust this to my ancestors. I'm going to literally ask my ancestors to do this for me because I can't do it. So it's very simple. I just talk to them. I say, Maman, Papa, I can't do this. Can you do this? Please help. I sit there, and it's kind of like a meditation. And I get in touch with their presence, in every cell of my body, my mother, my father, my grandparents. I get in touch with their qualities, with their skills, their creativity, their wisdom, and it has to be particular and specific. I see the great teacher that my father is. I see my mother's humor and creativity and intelligence, and then for my grandparents, I really get in touch with their specific qualities. I don't limit it just to my genetic ancestors. I also invite my teacher, say, Tai, I'm stuck. I can't do this. Please help. And I see my teacher's presence in me in this present moment. I wouldn't be who I am without my teacher. So I know somehow he's there. And when he's there, all of his ancestors are there, all the way back to the Buddha. So we can access, we can kind of turn on all of these lineages that we stand in a very concrete and practical way. And then, so I've sort of activated that insight, and that's a kind of, it's a kind of meditation. It takes some time. I'm sitting mostly in silence, just feeling what I'm feeling, which is partly the stuckness, the difficulty, the challenge of that moment. And then in a weird way, it's kind of like giving up. It's like saying, me as this, separate, no, can't. Can't, won't. If I'm just me, I can't do it. Forget it. I give up. So then, but in that surrender, I entrust this what needs to be done to my ancestors, and I allow them to step in. And then literally a couple of minutes later, it just flowed from me. I made a voice note. I recorded the whole chapter in one go. And it was alive. It was flowing. It was, sort of deeper and more touching than I could have made it. It's like I didn't feel I have to do anything. It was at that point completely effortless. So that's an example, but this is something that we can do, that we have to cultivate and train. So every day there can be moments when we invite our parents, our grandparents, our teachers, our ancestors to do what we're doing with us. And it can be as simple as taking a step and saying, Daddy, I walk for you. Maman, This step is your step. I walk with your feet. I breathe with your lungs. I sit with your back. And we let them live in us and with us in these moments. Whether they are still alive or already passed away, they are in us. And so we can train that continually in lots of different ways.
Thank you so much for sharing such a recent and visceral and very human story with us, because it's comforting to know that the monastics also get stuck. And it reminds me a little bit of sometimes when I have to give a talk and I'm nervous, I ask, especially because the talks I give are often around nature and supporting nature, I sort of just ask all the beings, I'm like, I'm doing this for you. Can you kind of come and help me? I'm like, can the forests and the rivers, like, can you speak with me? Because I kind of can't do this alone, and I'm doing this with you and for you. So I've never done it with my ancestors, but it's interesting to connect in that way. I'd love to pull on two threads of what you shared that will kind of lead to a conversation on like spiritual bypassing or materialism, actually. One of the things that I learned a lot when I was with you, and in a way, one of the core teachings I feel of the lineage is you talk a lot about being with the body, touching our grief, touching our pain, and in a way, I have a quote here. I can't remember where I read it from, but it comes from you, and it says, mindfulness is recognizing exactly what is there and calling it by its name. And what I heard in your story, Brother Spirit, was sort of, you called your emotions by their name. You were there when the feeling, you didn't push them aside. You became, in a way, friends with your suffering, which is also something that you speak about a lot. And you metabolized it. And so this is where I'll get to the spiritual bypassing piece, because what you often teach is hold these emotions like children, hold them close, which is something I've begun doing a lot more. For me, spiritual bypassing is, but that doesn't really exist, and everything is one, and we're living in this massive consciousness. And so can you talk a little bit about pitfalls or ways that we can, and maybe this brings us to the conversation of the transcendent and the immanent, or maybe it doesn't, because that's sort of the metaphysics piece, but yeah, sister, I'd be curious also how you relate to this question on like spirituality can also have us bypass, right? And I've met meditators or people who are in lineages, and they're sort of complicated in some ways. So how do we not consume and abstract the practice and just make it something that makes us feel good without this necessary into the mud, which is kind of what Brother Spirit spoke of?
Thank you so much, Alexa, for this question. We think about this a lot. And especially when we hear these echoes of things we might have said or our teacher has said, and then it becomes spiritual bypassing, and we're like, how did that happen? How did that happen? So I think how does it happen? It happens because, we're always looking for like a quick kind of get out of jail free card. And sometimes people might use different teachings from different traditions, whether it's Buddhism or other spiritual traditions, as a kind of get out of jail free card. It's like, it doesn't matter, we're all one, or even so we use it as a sort of throwaway because our mind is really struggling to kind of hold the pain or the contradictions of the kind of suffering of the world right now. And especially it comes up for people, I think, about this thing about giving ourselves permission to enjoy a peaceful moment, because we feel so guilty. Like if all of the suffering is real, like how can we ever enjoy a sunrise or the blue sky or the, these fresh green leaves that we have in Europe this spring? It's like, how can we allow both to be true? And I think part of the courage of our teacher in this particular tradition is to say both happiness and suffering into are. So that's where we get this interbeing. There is interbeing between the happiness and suffering. They coexist like the compost and the vegetable, like the mud and the lotus. And we sort of stand in both of them with fearlessness and courage. And the stability and the resilience comes from our mindful breathing, our mindful walking, and also our kind of collective practice in small groups or bigger groups, or really leaning into like just human solidarity and companionship is essential actually to really handling some deep suffering, and giving us that ability to touch wonder also in moments of pain. And I think spiritual bypassing is also coming from sometimes a kind of exploitation of spiritual traditions in a kind of individualistic, kind of capitalistic way. Like, it just has only recently occurred to me that for many people, meditation is an entirely individual pursuit. And it's weird for me because, confession, I was never able to meditate alone before coming to the monastery. Like, it just wasn't something that made sense to me. Like, but if a whole group of people's doing it, I will just sit down and soak up this energy of peace, and then it kind of penetrates me and it sort of soaks me, and then I find myself breathing and quite calm and enjoying the bird song and whatever. And then from there I've sort of developed a very collective meditation practice. But like, it's occurring to me that now that like millions of people in the West are following meditation as an individual pursuit, and then for like individual attainments, when like from the history of Buddhism, the Buddha had a community of like 1,200 monks. Like, it has always grown as a kind of collective endeavor where we're touching into being and fellowship and companionship. And he once said, to one of his close attendants, that friendship isn't just an important ingredient of the spiritual path. It's not just half of it, it's all of it. Like, friendship is all of the spiritual path. And I would say that like community and collective practice helps us counter spiritual bypassing, because we have a lot more energy and courage and non-fear when we are as a group. And there's been incredible actually scientific research on this, about the experiments. Brother Spirit was telling us all about them, but experiments where if someone's holding your hand in a difficult moment, it will change your experience of the situation. If you need to climb a mountain and you have one or two people with you, you'll have more courage. And if you have a whole body, a group of you trying to climb that mountain, you'll have so much more energy to go up it. And so that's, I think, spiritual bypassing is ultimately coming from fear. I was going to say cowardice, and that sounded such a Christian kind of term, but it's coming from a lack of courage to face the messiness and the mud of things, and just wanting to broad brush over things and get an easy get out clause.
Yeah, this is a kind of topic that we're quite attentive to and passionate about in the sense because we encounter so many people throughout the year coming on retreats. And so we are sensitive to attitudes and ways of thinking about meditation or the spiritual path, and ways that our culture, in our present economic system, maybe instrumentalizing mindfulness, taking it out of its context of spirituality and ethics, and making it into a tool to get what we want, right? And in a very kind of I don't know, in a very sad way, sometimes what we want is just, actually, no, let's have some more compassion. It's understandable. Things are hard. It's understandable that sometimes what we want is just not to feel the pain anymore, and maybe even to feel good, right? We just want to feel some happiness and joy. It's understandable. And so we might approach spirituality or meditation with the idea, I'm going to learn this thing that I can do, and it's going to make me feel good. I'm just going to feel good things, and I only want to feel the good things because life is hard enough as it is. And that's totally understandable. I sometimes feel like that myself. But when I look at it deeper for myself, what I realize is I don't want my happiness to exclude the suffering, because then it wouldn't be real happiness. It would be superficial. I wouldn't be satisfied with it. I don't want my awakening, if that's what we're going to call it, or my insight or my joy, to be only positive, or to be just about how I feel, just about feeling good. because then it would be fake. And I don't want to be fake. I don't think any of us really, like when we really ask ourselves, I don't think any of us want to be fake. We want to be real. We want to be connected. And it's compassion that connects us, that allows us to be with pain in a way that isn't overwhelming. And in fact, then, when we look at pain through the lens of compassion, it's already a kind of painful joy. It's kind of like we feel relief because we know that we're not cutting ourselves off. We're not trying to, bury our head in the sand or pull the blanket over our head. We're being real, we're being authentic, and we're doing our best in that moment. And that can already give rise to a special kind of happiness, which is like the happiness of not being fake, the happiness of being real and being in touch with the true situation. And that's the kind of happiness I want. It's a happiness that might have space for tears, that has space for my pain and for the pain of this moment. And that's not to say that we're not allowed to touch joy, right? Because the joy part is absolutely essential. We need to really learn how to access the joy that is available to us in every single moment, because that's our capacity to be with the pain. The more we can be in joy and vitality and the sense of life moving through us and the wonder of that, the more capacity we have to do what we know that we want ultimately to do, which is to be with the pain and to help to hold it. I can't hold pain unless I have an enormous reserve of joy, right? So then I can know that, yes, cultivating joy is part of my spiritual practice, for sure, but it's not a joy which is disconnected from the true state of affairs, from the pain. It's a joy that goes with, that embraces, that sort of that can sort of infuse the pain and the difficulty.
It strikes me that just to live with good intentions and trying to be a good human involves so many mental and psychological gymnastics, right? It's like constantly holding these different truths and really trying to be okay in it. For example, we often hear in the climate space, well, the earth will continue and humans will be gone, or we exist inside of these wider cycles, or extinctions have come and gone. And there are these sorts of meta level truths, or meta level, let's say, what is truth? Maybe there's no such thing. So these meta level perspectives on the world, which is we exist in wide arcs of time, we're here for a second, things come and pass, but not using that to check out and be like, oh, I'm just a drop. But how can that coexist with actually feeling and living everything even more deeply? And actually I'll be even more rooted to the earth, I'll be even more engaged in my community. And I feel myself constantly ping-ponged between those different, immanent, transcendent, here and now, like long ancestry, being Alexa, like all these things. So I appreciate we get to talk a little bit about them here, and also just like it's messy. And I think that's why, sister, to your point, community, and let's be in context where we can talk about this together. In the little time we have left, there's a lot of things I wanted to chat about, but we'll narrow it down. You're today as an organization, if organization isn't the right word, but as a community of practice and as lineage holders, that's better. You are in a period of transition, and you are deeply engaging with the world and being, activist and engaged, but also sort of timeless. And I will put in the show notes ways for people to engage. You have an incredible course, Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet, I've participated in it, and it's so rich and nuanced and deep. So I'd just be curious if there's anything you'd like to share about that, about your community, about where you find yourselves, anything in our last minutes that feels like it would be the perfect bookend and closure for this conversation.
Well, thank you, Alexa. Yeah, we're in this time of transition. We got to learn with a great Zen master. He passed away in his early 90s just 2 years ago. And we've gone through this incredible process of letting him be free, as it were. And now we have like a whole kind of horizon open as like what is essentially a young spiritual community. So for anyone listening to this, we're putting out our bat signal. You know, if you feel that you would like to help kind of shift consciousness, I guess. And that is the kind of work that we're engaged in as a community here in the southwest of France. We welcome thousands of people every year who come on these journeys with us, and we kind of grow. I feel like we're the river bank or something, and the river's flowing through us. So like some people think of monastic life as being really renouncing, and like I feel like I've never encountered so much of the world as I have as a monastic, sort of flowing through the community here. And yeah, we welcome seekers of all faiths and none and all traditions to kind of come and explore some of the ideas we've been speaking about here, and to really be in kind of close connection to the incredible land here that we're also rewilding and healing in our own ways. And yeah, to live a simple form of communal living, which is becoming like more and more rare. Like to have, you know, like most of the time, literally, I share meals with like 100 people, like morning, noon, and night. Like that is my life, and it's just a very beautiful thing for those of us who want to show that another way is possible and experiment with this model of how humans can be in different relation to one another and to the planet, how we can be in different relationship to like happiness and suffering, and how we can just sort of, I guess we would also see ourselves as a laboratory, like experimenting different kind of trainings of mind and trainings of habit, trainings with the body, how to change that way of seeing that we've been talking about, you know, whether it's over 7 days, 14 days, 3 months, how to kind of hold each other to that and help in this kind of community context is so powerful. And I feel like, you know, the reason I came to the monastery because I felt shortchanged after university. I was like, I can't believe this is meant to be one of the best universities in my country, and like I have not understood the meaning of life. Like, like I was just like, this is not fair, you know. But now I feel like I'm in I mean, it sounds cheesy to say it, but it's like lifelong learning. It's just so rich. And yeah, we really, you know, if anyone wants to come and explore, it's just so open. And Alexa, it's been so fantastic to have you with us and to have so many conversations like this for hours on end together. It's just so wonderful. And that's really all I want to say. And that this incredible course, we just had 1,200 of us just finished the last cohort of the course, Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet. Totally recommend it. I just met someone this morning who did it last year. She's like, it changed my life because it was able to shift her way of seeing her relationship with the world. And she just found it so deep and yet also accessible. So it's a deep journey through kind of Buddhist deep ecology, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And meeting friends along the path. She's still meeting with her group that formed last spring. So it's just incredible. That's what I'd say. Bat signal is out there. Our doors are open. Come and visit us here in Plum Village in southwest France.
I'm imagining Sister True with like this sort of like Jedi suit, like up in the sky.
I want it. I want it.
We're going to get one for you.
I just want to echo what Sister True Dedication already said, that I think this is a tough moment for humanity. You know, if you have your eyes, ears, and heart open right now, then you know that what's coming down the line is maybe not going to be any easier. It might be harder. It's kind of easy to go into doom scenarios. The media is feeding us various versions of apocalypse, and you know, kind of like it's very I think that there is a rising wave of despair, and there's many young people choosing not to have children, feeling like it's over, it's too late, we can't do enough. The the corporations are never going to let go of their profit-seeking behaviors. The extraction is going to go on until the very last drop. We're going to kill everything. We're going to destroy ourselves and so many other species. I don't need to go on that thread too long. It's kind of very, it's very present in our collective consciousness. And so if you're feeling that, and if you're wondering, I want to speak directly to whoever's listening right now. Like if you're feeling any part of that, and if you're wondering, what is the appropriate response? What do I do with my one precious life to respond to this present moment, this collective present moment that we're in? Then I think, Plum Village is a place where you can come and allow that question to move through you. We offer these spaces of retreat and meditation where that question is very alive for all of us, and our intention is not to convert anyone to Buddhism, or to say you have to come and join Plum Village, or we're the only way or the best way, or none of that. We just want to allow people to authentically be in that process of ripening with that question, because we trust that asking that question deeply enough, with enough vulnerability and heart openness or open-heartedness, is the way. When we can really allow that question to live in us, we find our way. Yeah. And it, for some, the way is monastic life. Let's just put it out there. It's a great way. I'm just going to wave the flag for monastic life in the 21st century. It's pretty cool. We have a lot of space for creativity, for engagement. There's we're a very dynamic community. We're a very connected community. It's extremely challenging. There is a lot to give up, a lot to renounce, obviously not easy. But there's also so much joy and so much fulfillment that comes from knowing that collectively we are able to contribute something. We're able to help others hold their pain. We're able to, in that helping others, we also are helping ourselves to hold our own pain and challenge. We're able to know how to get in touch with our deep sense of wonder and joy as we help others to touch their sense of aliveness and wonder and joy. And it's a good life.
The unexpected monastic advertisement at the end of the podcast, Alexa.
Just put it out there.
Exactly. I loved it.
We're not recruiting. We're just saying we have fun.
There's people out there wondering what to do with their lives.
I think it's right, and there were different things in what you shared. First of all, you shared just sacred questions around like the most deep questions people can ask of life, especially right now in a crisis of meaning. And Plum Village being a place where you can come for 3 days a week, a month, and just be in a community, even in silence, where those questions are being asked. I mean, I know firsthand from myself and people around me that you have profoundly changed people's lives in those retreats. And I can't think of many places today that, reach thousands of people. And sister, to your point, sort of, here's an invitation to be, to work on consciousness or to evolve or approach consciousness differently in its evolution. And yes, maybe a small percentage of those people want to stay, and maybe people come and leave. And I think it's all absolutely welcome. So no, I thank you guys so much, really. And thank you for this Such a beautiful conversation. I must say, it's just so incredible the way that you share your wisdom and all your work that you're doing in the world. So I'm really, really happy that you exist. So thank you for being. Yeah, and thank you for making the time to come on this. I know you have a lot of things to do, and monastics are the busiest people on the planet, actually. So it's true.
Because our days are scheduled right from 8 a.m. Sorry, 5 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Yeah.
So that's why.
So,
But thank you for your
making
incredible
the time.
questions, Alexa. It's just so enjoyable to have this conversation with you and to think through some of these things that we've been talking about with you for a while, and also to see how together, I think we feel you're also a friend on the path, and how we'll be evolving through these questions, over the years to come as well. It's just, incredible to learn together. So thank you for the deep thought that you've been putting into all of this and into these questions, and just so great to, share our journeys together.
Yeah, so much gratitude also. Your way of holding this space and holding a space of shared reflection and feeling, not just with us, but with all your listeners, because I think that's what generates the joy of this conversation. So thank you for that. It's really wonderful.
We all learn from our teachers, don't we?